we don't live in that world anymore, right? This is evidenced by the fact that every time something goes wrong, it's the network's problem. So you are responsible for this. And so I think once network teams, engineers, operators recognize that this is the reality, to be responsible for all of that, you need tools to give you the visibility to know what's really going on.
Welcome to the podcast dedicated to the art and science of observability. This is Signal Over Noise. Welcome back to another episode of Signal Over Noise. Now, for today's episode, we are going to be doing something a little bit different. Typically, we're talking about technical deep dives, industry insights, but for today's episode, I thought we'd talk a little bit about ourselves, but not in a super self-promotional way, right? We actually want to share how to get started with a free trial of ElastiFlow to bring that network observability into whether it's your home lab or to your work environment. So for today's episode, I thought I'd bring on two of our sales engineers, Brad Collins and Rich Martin. Welcome, team. How's it going today?
Hello.
Going good. How are you?
Doing well. So excited to have you both here. And Rich, your first episode of Signal Over Noise.
Yeah, excited to be here.
So you've been here about, 2 or 3 weeks now?
3 complete weeks. I'm on my 4th now. Yeah.
What surprised you the most? You're a network guy.
Yeah. I'll give you 2 observations. How about that?
Great.
Observation number 1, having talked to many customers and prospects now, it's interesting that prospects are really, really interested in having some higher quality tools on the networking side. And customers, when we do check-ins with them, they love the tool, right? They see an immediate amount of value there. So that's observation 1. Observation 2 is when I actually installed it into my home lab, because that's the first thing we do is I got to get this thing in my home lab stood up. Kind of surprised me of what I didn't know about my own network, being kind of a long-term networking person, career and hobbies as well. So I kind of ran into a situation where I saw some things going on in the network that shouldn't have been.
Little jump scare?
Little jump scare. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, so just another reminder, right, that you don't really know how bad your tools are until you get that good one. Brad, any thoughts there? You've been here for a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm coming up on, 8 months now, 9 months now. And to echo Rich's observations, we get the opportunity to show them things that maybe they haven't seen in their network, or help them, get rid of the finger pointing and prove that, hey, it's not the network this time.
Rich, you shared some interesting stories specifically around your cameras. Let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and embarrass myself then and tell the story. But I think it's important because I think it's probably something everybody will probably relate to, if you run your own network or if you think you've got a handle on everything. So I installed the ElastiFlow solution and got super excited when I could log in and see all the visualizations, and something kind of stuck out at me when I started digging into some of the data there, especially when we take a look at the top talkers. One of the things that was popping up was there's a subnet here that shouldn't be showing up based off of how I'm capturing the flow data in my network, really just through my firewall. And that certain subnet was where my IP cameras are on. And it's, and I'm trying to follow the right protocols, put everything in in its own subnet. We should assume these things try to call home, right? And so you should block that at the firewall. Let's put them in its own VLAN. So I had all that going and I'm seeing these things pop up, and it's 2 in particular coming in from a certain subnet. And I'm like, what did I do wrong here? Am I capturing something on the inside of the network that I shouldn't? So I kind of went back and looked through all the setup that I did on my router, and I said, no, something else is going on here. And so I started to dig into the dashboards a little bit more, right? And very quickly you can pin, the IP address and start to look at what are the protocols? Where is it going? Yeah, it's showing me some geo IP information. It's going to China, and it's also going to Amazon. And I'm like, oh man, and that's when the jump scare hit me. Whoa, what's going on here? This is not good. I've got rogue cameras going on everywhere. With the solution, I can actually look at how much data it's sending. And then I go, oh, that's actually not that much data. It's it's like in the bytes for some of these packets. And so I'm like, okay, maybe it's not doing video streaming, but what's going on in my network? And as I start to kind of uncover layer by layer what's going on, just through all the data and the ability to navigate through that data and visualize it in different ways that gives me more insight, I realized, these things are misbehaving because of a human error. And that human error, unfortunately, was me. So about 3 months ago, what I did was I switched over from one type of firewall, pfSense, to another one, OpenSense. And in doing that, that's a pretty big, I mean, at least for a home lab, right? I'm impacting everything on the network. So I was having problems with some IP cameras at the time. And so in order to troubleshoot them, what I did was I made myself a shortcut. I made it so that I could access those cameras from another part of my network through the firewall. And as I got those problems solved, I went on to something else that was going on. And guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to fix what I did, right? I poked holes to the firewall. Guess what I forgot to do? Take those things back out. Mm-hmm. And so by using the ElastiFlow solution, I was really quickly shown the error of my own ways, which was sometimes we make human errors and sometimes those things happen. And the wild part to me afterwards is like, how would I have caught that otherwise? Because for 3 months, this was like 3 months ago when I did this, that's kind of the length of time they've been out there doing what they've done, sending that data out. And so I thought, wow, it would have been a lot more difficult. And then for me to really dig through that data would have been a lot of extra work for me to do. I would have had to set up a remote monitoring port or a packet capture or Wireshark and a PC and having all of that right then and there for me to click through in a set of dashboards that just pops everything up and steers me to exactly what I need to look at. And then finally, I was able to make the changes to the firewall and then verify that those things were actually working, which is also a nice little extra step that I wasn't expecting to be able to use the tool for, but there it was right there.
Instead of having all these point solutions, which is that even feasible for a home lab to have all these different point solutions? Do you really want to do that after you've been swivel chairing all day back at the office? Would be nice to have all that.
No, it's really not feasible to have all that stuff, right? A lot of times we have just like your typical monitoring, something like SNMP polling for interfaces to show bandwidth and errors and things like that. They don't give you the depth of data to troubleshoot beyond like, hey, I've got plenty of bandwidth or not, or the port's up or it's not, right? And then from that point, you are swivel chairing to a lot of other, not even focus tools, just like, oh, I think I can look at this over here. Maybe I have this dashboard over here on this switch or this router or this firewall. And you're really kind of at a loss to figure out what tools you have and what they can actually give you as far as visibility is concerned.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rich. We not to go straight to the sales part of the sales engineer job, but Rich did all this with a free trial. Right? We don't even we haven't even upgraded him to the permanent license yet. Right? He's too new. We got to make sure we vet him out a little bit. But it's incredible what you can find quickly. Yeah, it was the same for me. Just a couple of quick configurations of the back end and then installing the collector, and all of a sudden you have just this immense amount of data that you can dig through. And I don't know about you, Rich, but I've spent way too much time now digging in ElastiFlow data at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning going, who is up? Why is this happening on my network right now?
I think we need to coin a phrase around something around ElastiFlow dashboard addiction or something like that. Because right. I'm suffering from that now too.
Yes, indeed.
Nice. Lots of great stuff in there. So now we talk about this, what it means for your home lab, right? But how does that scale? What does that look like for, an organization that is experiencing the same thing, or you can't secure what you can't see? What does that look like for organizations that are looking to test out ElastiFlow in their enterprise?
That's a great question, Sarah. And the good news is it looks almost exactly the same. In standing up a trial in a large production environment is as easy as standing up the free trial at home. We do have a premium trial license that we'd love to share with our large customers and get them collecting flow in minutes, really, especially if they already have a kind of an hotel data store. Then we can get the collector up and running in minutes and have them seeing this kind of data very, very quickly.
So let's go ahead and maybe show off some demos and Rich, that story, like what it actually looks like within those dashboards and why you guys are so addicted.
I was so excited to be able to demo this, but I don't want to put my cameras back into the state they were in. So what I did was I kind of labbed it up so I could show you what that kind of looked like. So awesome. Let me get to this screen here. Share.
Come on, Rich, you got to say it. It's the two of the most common phrases.
Uh,
Oh, sorry, I was on mute, and let me share my screen.
Let me share my screen, and then can you see that?
That's right. Yes,
Can you
we
see
can
that?
see it.
Okay, now okay, good. All right, so when I logged into my dashboard, this is pretty typically what I saw, right? I got an overview, and this is great. I mean, I see a lot of, like, at a glance, this is like the 10,000 foot view, if you will, of what's going on. And there's a lot coming at you. Really, I think where things start to get interesting for me is when I went to the top end. This is what I talked about earlier. And scrolling through here, I see my top clients, and I've got some enrichments going on. If you think about what flow data is, it comes out as IP addresses and ports, right, and some other data like that. But with the ElastiFlow, even I'm using I haven't earned my wings to get the premium license yet, so I'm using the basic license. But even with that, I can turn on DNS enrichment, and so I get DNS names and SNMP interfaces and things like that. So again, right out the box, this is the way I was looking at it, and it was really cool to start to see this. But then as I was scrolling down, I'm looking at this IP address, and this is like my normal network is 192.168, which is pretty typical for a lot of folks. But my security cameras is on this weird 1099.99, and I chose that because it kind of pops out, right? It's a different subnet altogether, and I was seeing those two IP cameras on this subnet, and this was really bugging me because it's like they're not supposed to be there. I'm not supposed to be seeing this right now. And so what I ended up doing was I could pin this. And when I pin this, it's going to filter all of this data. And if you'll notice, I've got the last 4 hours here. So for the last 4 hours of data, this has been transmitting. Now I've set this up. This is a laptop generating some traffic, so I can see it from that same subnet, from my security camera subnet. And it's able to, I'm able to like pin it out and start to see some really interesting details of what's going on now. Specifically, like who are they talking to, right? And I can see some of this is external, some of this is internal, and I can start to see some graphs here, some real patterns of spiking traffic at certain intervals, right? All I did was I clicked one thing and pinned this up and started looking at that data. And then as I came over to here, you can start to visualize, and this is where we get really powerful with this. All of this data displayed in different ways starts to really help you understand and give you the insights of what's going on. So now I've pinned this data in a way that visualizes for this time frame, 4 hours, what's been going on and how much data has passed through. So it's not a lot of data, 2.2 megabytes of aggregate data for this time frame. But now I can see how that traffic is passing through. What's the application here? So we've got HTTPS, and then what's the endpoints it's talking to? And so I can start to highlight this and this is where I was getting the idea of like, okay, what kind of traffic was this IP camera stuff doing? How many bytes was it sending? And that's when, after that initial gut punch of, oh no, what's going on here? I was realizing, okay, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe it's not streaming every frame of video across to China and to Amazon. And so I started to get a better view of what's happening here. Then if I cut over to like traffic details, again, this helps me to get an idea of, again, I've got this pinned up specifically here. So I'm just looking at the details of this particular traffic, of all the flow data that's being captured. I'm really just pinpointing and bullseyeing into this because this is the thing that's got my attention. And now I can start to see like all the spiky bits of what's going on. But I'm thinking here, like, now I'm starting to get carried away. Like initially I wanted to just block this stuff, right? Now I'm given the opportunity to kind of dig in a little bit. And this is where I go kind of in a rat hole going, okay, what else is this doing? What else is going on? Because initially I'm like, I need to get this stuff done. I need to figure out why this thing is going through my network. But now I'm going, well, what's actually going on? Why, not just why it's happening, but what it's actually doing. And these are the kind of things that I don't normally have with the tools that I've been unfortunately living with, in my network engineer life. And so kind of getting carried away here. And here's the coolest part it gets me to. I go down to flow records, and this is where you get it all, right? This is where I can see everything that's going on, including the individual flow records themselves of what's happening. And now I can see the protocol build, the protocols that it's using. It's doing a lot of DNS calls, obviously, probably in response to the HTTPS. And I can start to really dig into what's going on here, including, if I click over here, getting all the flow data that's available for every single one of these records. And if you think about it, this is what ElastiFlow is doing. This is the real value of what's going on. It's capturing all of this. And of course, my scale is small, but we scale to, hundreds of thousands of flows for enterprises. But at the same time, we're enriching all of this. That's what ElastiFlow is doing, is enriching all this. So we have this visibility. And then at the end, I'm like, okay, I need to solve this problem, right? So I need to go over to my firewall and I need to figure out what's going on. And that's when I figured out, okay, I had some rules in here that were allowing this to exit the network. And so I can now block this firewall rule, which I just did on my other screen here. You don't see that. So now that client that I have set up, it's really pulling some HTTPS traffic over and over again in a loop. That's no longer able to go and get to the internet. But how do I know that? And this is kind of that last part, is like, can I use this tool to help verify that the change that I made that should now be blocking the traffic at the firewall is actually occurring? And if you think about it, sure, you can. What you can do is, what I ended up doing is I just put my interval down to like a smaller amount, right? In fact, we can go to like 5 minutes and apply that. And then we'll just do an auto refresh every 10 seconds. Apply that. And now, as time kind of ticks on, what I should see is the flow records go down lower and lower and lower. And after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it should go down to the lowest amount possible. In fact, it could go completely away depending on the nature of the network traffic. But what I was doing here at this point when I was troubleshooting my network and solving it is exactly what I was doing. I was like, okay, the flow record should click down. And what I'm looking for here is just, I want to make sure that when the destination that's going off of my network, that goes away. And I should only, if anything, I should only see traffic within that same subnet or that same VLAN if it's presented here. And so, because I'm not worried about that, that's not going off net and going somewhere it shouldn't, that's staying on my network, and then I can handle that afterwards. And so over time, if we let this go, for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so, eventually those flow records will go very close to zero.
That's awesome. Those quick drill downs and all that context just at your fingertips right there, instead of, like you said, having to toggle between other tools, which probably not super realistic for your home lab, but certainly trying to make all those pivots at the office when there's an outage or something critical happening.
Again, I did get kind of carried away in the data that was presented to me, but it gave me so much better idea of what's actually going on, right? My initial reaction is, I got to stop this thing, which is a good reaction, but I was given all of the details to go and do that. Right? The data that was presented to me and the way it was presented to me in those dashboards told me exactly what was going on and gave me like, okay, this is where I need to look to resolve this problem. So like we call that like the ability to reduce the time to resolution, right? To troubleshoot this, and I've got the data to now go directly into my firewall, and I know exactly what I'm looking for. Typically that's what you do in a real enterprise environment. Let's go fix that. Yeah. But what got me kind of astray was the fact that like, oh, I can go look and what is all the traffic that's going on? Where is it going? And it's like, okay, now I have all of this other information. And while it may not be something that like initially I probably need to solve this problem, it opens up this floodgate of like, wait a minute, I can use this to troubleshoot the problem. Wait a minute, I can use this to resolve the problem faster. Wait a minute, I can use this to validate and verify the change that I just made in the firewall is actually working. And that's when it kind of opens up this thing and you're awestruck. You're like, okay, I get it now. Once I know how to use the data, first I got to have the data. Now I need to know how to use the data, right? And once I use the data, it kind of opens up everything that now is possible that I couldn't really do before without going from one place to another place to another place to another place, hoping to have that information and trying to correlate it together. That swivel chair process really destroys everything.
Yeah. So not only are you able to go in and remediate, to go in and fix the issue, but you're able to then proactively identify and
right. And how I can use this tool for all kinds of other use cases now.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah, I have a slightly different example from my home network. I started, we talked in the last episodes about how I found a 3D printer that was talking to all kinds of crazy things with a huge amount of sessions and let me show you what that looks like, and how I've morphed that into figuring out what is actually happening on the rest of the network as things change here. And so, like Rich, I started on the top end, the top talkers, and was just curious, does anything look odd, right? So, and for me, this stood out for this IP address. This host name app2 here is my server that everything's running on. So I knew that it would be fine, right? There should be a lot of sessions to that. Everything's talking to it. ElastiFlow is going there. All the flows going there. Everything's happening. But this guy with 13,669 sessions in the last hour, that's something I want to get curious about. And so I started looking at what it might be. And, between this and my router config, seeing what DHCP address had been assigned where, I found out that this is that 3D printer I was talking about. Well, why so many sessions? Well, it turns out that it does a session, a query to DNS about every second as a keep alive. So it's absolutely ridiculous. Nobody should be using DNS as a keep alive, but this 3D printer manufacturer thought that was a great idea, and that's what they're doing. So
it's a feature.
It's a feature, absolutely. So we found that out. And then I got the privilege of hosting Rich and some of our other colleagues at the house last week for a training session, just to bring everybody up to speed and work together to break things and fix things. So it was like we were running our own little, enterprise network in the house. And one of the things that we struggled on, I struggled on, Rich figured it out as the new guy here, was classifying traffic. Because as Rich mentioned, there's a lot of ways we can enrich the traffic, enrich the raw flow, but we can also help classify the traffic. And one of the things that we noticed that wasn't happening was the way I had my network set up was keeping us from seeing Netflix traffic as an example, right? So maybe we've got some sort of streaming service or any other client server kind of application out there, and we want to classify it and watch for it. We can do that with Netflix. So I've got a stream going in the background. Promise I'm not watching it, Sarah. It just happens to be running. It's not it's a really great movie actually, but we'll talk about that in another podcast. But now I can see, what is happening, where this is going through this particular application, what the, how much traffic we're seeing, it's coming from my laptop. It's talking to 4 different hosts in the Netflix IP space. And so it was really easy to, classify the data as part of our training exercise. And now, as I watch things coming across my network, I see Netflix, I see YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, things like that you can classify. And so it's, while maybe not the most enterprisey in examples, it is important data at the enterprise level, because you need, productivity is important. And if we need to, limit the amount of social media presence, for instance, for our company, because we have classified information or sensitive information, or, we're healthcare or something like that, then, that's a good way to figure out, hey, is this happening on my network right now? And if it is, what do I need to do to fix it? And then that's where, as we saw in Rich's demo, you can, then go over to the firewall, shut it down, and watch it go away. So that's one of the fun findings we had last week in our little training class.
I love that, in real time. All right. So now, Rich, I know.
Just a minute, Sarah. We're at a good part of the movie. No, I'm kidding. I'll turn it off.
What movie are you not watching, Brad?
I actually couldn't tell you. I just picked the first thing that was on Netflix.
I can't wait to see what that does to your algorithm. It's gonna be great.
I know, it's gonna be great.
So we've mentioned the 2 different types of trials a few times. Brad, would you mind giving us kind of like a overview of what the difference is between those 2 trials that are available?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big difference is length of time, right? Basic trial is meant to be used for a year in a smaller network. home labs, small businesses, things that are up to around 4,000 flow records per second. Switch over to the premium, and we're talking more of a true kind of traditional software trial, 30-day license for organizations of really any size, and up to 64,000 flow records per second, which is a tremendous amount of flow records. The basic license and the premium license share the out-of-the-box dashboard capabilities, some machine learning capabilities, metadata enrichment, and really a robust support of vendor IEs that nobody else can even come close to. And then finally, the premium also adds in our threat intelligence feed for MITRE attack mapping and data, additional application enrichment. That enrichment I showed you for classifying things like Netflix.
Now, for anyone interested in getting a free trial, you can either scan the QR here, or you can go to elastflow.com/get started. And now it's time for some hot takes. So, Rich, new guy, I'm gonna let you go first. What is your hot take?
I think my hot take is this. We live in a time now where network teams are responsible not just for the network and the infrastructure, but what goes over the network. And that sounds a little nuts because networking typically has been led by this demarcation mindset. Like, here's my switch or here's my router, here's a port, your thing plugs into that server guy. We don't live in that world anymore, right? This is evidenced by the fact that every time something goes wrong, it's the network's problem. So you are responsible for this. And so I think once network teams, engineers, operators recognize that this is the reality, to be responsible for all of that, you need tools to give you the visibility to know what's really going on. So I think like we need to do a pivot and really recognize in the industry, like our data. But in fact, I'll go give you a second hot take. How about that? 2 for 1. Here's the second hot take. I can argue you're more responsible than anybody else. Why? Because all of those devices that connect to your network, you are responsible. You have access to all of those switches, all of those routers. Like, leave the firewall team aside. You have more visibility than them, right? All of those access points are places where you could start getting flow records from. So why aren't you doing that? Right? Why aren't you doing that? So if you're going to be held responsible for it, have the tools to give you the visibility so you know what's going on.
I like that. I think that's a nice challenge for our audience. Brad, how about you?
Yeah, for me, I think it comes down to data as well, right? The more you know, the better off you are. You really, we gave some interesting examples for small networks around, data that is unexpected or unnecessary, or in some cases dangerous, or could be threat intent, have a threat intent, and being able to see that quickly and understand how it affects your network and how it affects the applications and services running across your network is powerful. You really need to have it. Data is king. It's where everything is right now. And so the more you have, the better off you are.
I love that. Well, Brad, Rich, thank you both so much for joining today's episode, for sharing more about the free trial. We'll share links to how to get access to that free trial, links to the docs, links to all that great stuff in our show notes. And we will see you next time on Signal Over Noise. Thanks, everyone.